Good morning. Today is the 7th of January 2023. When I was making my top five with some special mentions for 2022, there was a story which I forgot to mention. Um, Turns out that, okay, instead of an also ran in my list, I'll give them their own video. First of all, some props. This is the artwork of George Perez, and excuse me, this is the artwork of Neal Adams, and to me, the back is more Neal Adams. Turns out, as you can tell from the shirt, that one of the first comic books I bought back in the day was a Neal Adams, and it was a Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, same difference, both green. I was maybe 9. I don't know. I was a kid, and at the time of seeing the artwork of Neal Adams, I was blown away. As anyone who's ever seen Neal Adams's work would be. After the artwork, which is good in its own right, of the 40s and the golden age and the silver age of comic books, the two standouts for those eras would be Will Eisner, come on, Matt Baker, come on, and that's a Steve Ditko, maybe he fits in. I was never a big fan of Jack Kirby. I found him to be the epitome of Silver Age artwork. It was okay for what it was. It just didn't have that extra snap that Neal Adams, when he burst onto the scene, wow, that changed the comic book industry, and it changed the perception of comic book artists to me. I don't know. And again, I was a kid blown away. By the way, uh, I did, of course, the Batman, the Neal Adams Batman. Come on, like that is an amazing bit of art. But my first Batman was actually Marshall Rogers. Oh, like some of his detective work were, again, some of the first comics, not the first, but blown away. I mean, after Neal Adams, and it's a totally different art style, but it's to me right up there with the Neal Adams work. Although Neal Adams is special in his art. The closest I think in modern comic books would be Ivan Reis, if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's the closest I can see to having the Neal Adams touch. It certainly has the same vibrancy, the same motion that the character through art that Neal Adams had. That's Neal Adams. George Perez also was, now I'm a little older. When the Perez work came out, now I'm probably about 16 or so. So, and his work was again, now it doesn't have the motion, the fluid of Neal Adams, but it has a drama that is, at the time, only Perez could do. His Crisis was an amazing artist for the series. I think they took him off of New Teen Titans to do this series, which was a great move. Although I really enjoyed his New Teen Titans work a lot. It was interesting, that title in particular, that they took a kind of a group of superheroes and made them the best-selling title for a time. DC was actually a best-selling, had a couple of best-selling titles. Wow, they actually overtook Marvel in the 80s for a year or two. That's about the best they could do. No shame on DC. I'm more of a DC guy than a Marvel guy. Although I loved the X-Men Claremont Burns run in specific. I mean, that actually, interestingly enough, the that run coincided with the New Teen Titans. I really enjoyed my comic books at the time. Um, in April, I think it was the 28th of 2022, Perez died. And then almost a week later, Adams died. And I remember when I heard, hey, I'm smiling, but I'm not smiling at the death. I'm smiling at now I can remember the art that was their creation, and that I enjoyed it so much at the time when it was fresh and new, and that was what the comic industry was at the time. And they were showrunners. I'm sorry, they were stars of their respective fields, companies, and then they passed. Interestingly enough, I collected in the late 70s, early 80s. I got out of it in the 90s through the early aughts, got back into it collecting when I got my spinal cord injury in the aughts, and then stopped in the teens because of the eye. I could no longer read a panel of comic books without seeing two panels, as you know, my dilemma with the eye situation. So I no longer collect comics, although I have them in the rags and they're packed and ready to go wherever I go, kind of thing. I would have actually brought up some of the original books, but they're in storage now. And getting them in my condition would have been just too much effort. And I'm sorry for my channel. I don't mind pushing myself. I just don't mind, or I don't want to push myself that hard. Because I do have, as it turns out, reprints, reprints of their work. And that's okay. Again, I can't read them anymore. I can look at the art, of course, but the writing, the art, the presentation is just too tiny, and my vision is just no longer what it was. Anyways, I just wanted to share with you that these artists deserved a place on my highlights of 2022, in that they were worthy of being on the list. I don't know where on the list, but well, I know it's not number one. I don't know where on the list per se, but they absolutely deserved an honorable mention, and I'm doing it right now. And what a better way to honor them than to give them their undivided thank you. I really enjoyed their work. Well, I was gonna say, I'm sorry. The final story I was gonna say, it's sort of, it is what it is. But the last comic book I bought of George Perez was Superman #1, not that #1. #1 for the New 52. He did the cover art for Superman 1, if I'm not mistaken. And I was at the time rather impressed that Blast from the Past, and he still had enough of Perez's style to come through. Although I was surprised that he was able to still produce. He must have been like that came, by the way, that came out in 11. So I'm assuming he was in his 50s when he was doing his work, so it'd be in his 80s, but he could still had enough to put out a cover. Good for you. Us old guys have to represent when we can. My last book that I bought from a Neal Adams creation was the Dead Man series, and I think that was late teens. I don't know. I know he's a name, and his art was, it wasn't what it was, but it still had what it took. My shuddering has more to do with his writing. For some reason, Neal Adams should never have been penning a storyline. He's much better at visualizing it through art. Just my take. No shade on the guy. It was his vision, his artistry. But if you can read Dead Man and understand it, give me a call and let me know what was going on. Visually, it worked. Storyline, I was scratching my head way too much to enjoy it. That said, it was a Neal Adams original, and I'm glad for it to be in my collection, even though I shudder to think about trying to read it. But that's just me. Anyways, that's what's going on behind the patch this morning. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. I will talk to you guys tomorrow.